Hi everyone, Mark Merrill with Firm. Time to rebuild the FBI and red flag laws. It's the title of today's program. Tom Fitton, president of judicialwatch.org, recently gave a speech in Washington, D.C., specifically addressed to leftist politicians' rhetoric and some important suggestions on how to make the FBI and Department of Justice more accountable. Really? Accountable to the American public and their protection, and also to protect the Republic. It's just a part of that speech he gave in Washington, D.C. recently.
I've encouraged President Trump publicly to treat the FBI as USAID and then some. Kash Patel should be spending his time tweeting excitedly about new hires. He should be spending his time asking everyone to go home. There isn't a job the FBI does that can't be done by another law enforcement agency in the federal government, if at all. And at the end of the day, the only people in the FBI should be Kash Patel and whoever he needs to, send text messages on Signal for him. And the same goes for the Justice Department. I don't trust the Justice Department to prosecute a jaywalking ticket. And Pam Bondi and the team there, they've got, and they will tell you this, they've got thousands and tens of thousands of James Comeys still working for them. And so what is the solution? Or how about a solution? Because I can talk forever about how the FBI can't investigate itself and the Justice Department is compromised by deep state actors, and Bondi and the top people spend most of their time just trying to get the few good things done they think they can get done, and they just can't fight every battle. Okay. Well, you know what? The President of the United States under the Constitution is the chief prosecutor. The founders, during the founding era, they called him the chief executive magistrate. Under the Article 2 powers of the President, he can order, initiate, stop, manage directly prosecutions. Now, am I suggesting President Trump, lead the trial team prosecuting Adam Schiff in court? Yeah. Well, he can under the Constitution, but I kind of highlight that theory in the sense that he can do much more than I'm sure Washington really wants him to do, the deep state, in terms of initiating these prosecutions and ensuring at least they're done. And so I'd recommend he appoints an independent counsel, special prosecutor that reports to him, an independent investigative prosecutorial unit that uses lawyers and prosecutors not from the FBI and Justice Department, but from other agencies or private individuals who know what to do, and just get it done. And they should report to him. He should run the prosecution to the degree he thinks appropriate. Any prosecution he should sign off on. Any investigations, what crimes to be investigated, he should provide that leadership. And when it comes to the prosecution, he can ask Pam Bondi what she thinks is an appropriate constitution. Is it valid? And of course, the protections of the Constitution still apply to the targets and defendants, but it will be done by an agency or a unit of the president, an appointee of the president that people will trust to get it done without regard for the political consequences.
That's Tom Fitton, folks, of Judicial Watch. And his organization is constantly filing briefs and state-by-state lawsuits in various courts in the U.S., such as demanding Biden's FBI for not replying about an alleged CCP operation, Chinese that is, to rig the 2020 election using fake mail-in ballots of all things. Corruption? Yeah, that's what communism does, folks. Yeah, but you can't tell a deflectocrat that. Some rhinos out there don't even believe it. Yike. Plus, in another lawsuit against the state of Arizona's Attorney General, Mr. Fitton's organization went after her for communications with former special counsel Jack Smith, who you may recall, unfortunately, tried to prosecute and imprison Mr. Trump for 700 years. And yet another suit, among many that Judicial Watch is pursuing, against the State Department for records labeling President Trump and his cabinet officials as disinformation purveyors. Jeez. Keeps going, doesn't it, folks? Well, welcome to Firm once again. We thank you for joining us. As we move on from Tom Fitton here and everything else, as we mentioned at the very beginning of the program, it's all about gun laws. In the state of Maine, red flag laws specifically. Maine has yellow flag laws, but they're not specific enough, and they should have been in place long before the Robert Card incident of October 25th, 2023, when many people died needlessly. No thanks to Janet Mills. In this particular instance, folks, on this particular topic about guns and firearms control, the legislature's Judiciary Committee, although bipartisan, keeps falling into their own setback traps, we call it, against the federal immigration laws without any backbone. Gee, why is that? Well, briefly, folks, two bills, first LD 1656, an act to facilitate compliance with federal immigration law by state and local government entities, sponsored by House Representative Sobolewski, and LD 1971, an act to protect workers in Maine by clarifying the relationship of state and local law enforcement agencies with federal immigration authorities, by Representative Dalek. They all sound the same, don't they? It's kind of ironic in a way. But these bills here, folks, we're getting a little bit of an update on it as we got information, as we do on a regular basis, from the stellar and very, very accurate and timely legislative counsel that gets these bills set up for sessions, work sessions, as well as public hearings. LD 1656, a majority of the committee voted that the bill ought not to pass, while a minority voted in favor of an amended version of the bill. When the amendment is posted on the legislature's website, I'm sure you can find that, folks, under the LD number 1656. So the House and Senate each accepted the ought not to pass majority committee report, so the bill is now dead. That's the one that is called an act to facilitate compliance with federal immigration law by state and local government entities. Now, as for LD 1971, a majority of the committee voted in favor of an amended version of that bill, again posted on the web page under the LD number 1971, but a minority of the committee voted that the bill ought not to pass. Again, the House and Senate have each adopted the ought to pass as amended majority committee report. The bill as amended still faces enactment votes in the House and Senate and could go to referendum, folks. So we'll have to see about that one. And as for the red flag laws amended, a proposed bill LD 1378, a recent update comes from an interview on WVOM radio, the GHRT morning show, with details from both a Democrat representative and Republican representative interviewed on June 19th. Here's how that went.
But is the bandwidth left within this legislative session to see this done? Once again, George assembled on the PDQ or telephone line. David Trahan of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine and State Representative Jennifer Poirier, the Republican of Skowhegan, with the insight into the issues and what's going on. They're both on the line for GHRT.
The main red flag law debate, the GOP counter-proposal. Where are we, David?
Well, after a tremendous amount of work from Representative Poirier leadership on the Republican side, I think we're poised to have a resolution to the work session on LD 1378, the red flag law. I think Representative Poirier found some information last night from the Speaker. I'll let her address that in just a minute, but I just want to say for your listeners that it isn't going to be black and white if we get this competing measure on the ballot. It's great policy. It's supported already by different organizations and groups, and we look forward to talking about it.
State Representative Poirier, give us the latest if you would. What have you heard from legislative leadership? Where are we on this?
Thank you, Rick. Yeah, it's been a long haul on this. For the past week, I've been demanding that we have a work session because it is in the joint rules that every piece of legislation needs to be reported out of committee, and the so-called red flag bill has not been reported out of the Judiciary Committee. I spoke with the Speaker last night again, and I was basically informed that we do have time. There will be a work session, and he indicated that it would be when we go back on Wednesday. So we should be able to introduce the competing measure, get that out on the table. I've already been talking to several other legislators about it, and I'm getting a great response about the mental health aspects in particular with this bill that red flag just does not have.
What would the referendum do?
Well, they're asking you to take what we have for an existing law with the highest levels of due process treatment for the individuals in crisis, really a good and successful law, and they introduce through this referendum an extreme risk protection order process that is much different. It's lower due process standards, and in the words of Mike Johnson from the state police, it'll undermine our existing law. It's been used now around 900 times. If the referendum passes, I can't imagine it wouldn't confuse police officers. It has the same title of the existing statute that we have now. So you're going to have two with the identical name. And I think, like I said, Mike Johnston from the state police said it was dangerous to both police officers, domestic violence victims, and just really mucks up the works.
State Representative Jennifer Poirier, since the day when we had the Democrat delayed, legally required public hearing on the red flag legislation, I wonder, have you heard, and at that time when lawmakers heard from Mike Johnson and they heard from the governor's office about concerns about the measure, have you heard a change in tone from any of the colleagues or any of those on the other side of the aisle that were perhaps adamant about red flag?
I wouldn't say that these folks were adamant about red flag in the first place, but I have talked to some of my Democrat colleagues who read through the language of the red flag proposal and compared it to measures we've had before the committee in previous years, and they didn't like the language. It didn't have safeguards like previous legislation may have had, and they weren't happy about it. And the fact is that no matter if you're Republican, if you're Independent or Democrat, people know that when people are saying they're going to commit suicide or if they're threatening the lives of others, there is a huge mental illness component in here. Whether the person's in crisis and it's for a short term or if it's a prolonged mental health issue, mental health plays a huge part in this, and that's why I think our competing measure is so very important, because it not only helps identify that, but it helps get a person help, and that's what we really need here in our state.
So, folks, that's really where it stands as far as the red flag law. And by the way, an important part is that it is slated to go to referendum, which is a plus for Maine voters in the fall of this year. In the meantime, folks, you can certainly take a look at all of our podcasts, and especially rewind and listen to this one, which will be published within the next 10 hours, on rumble.com/fairnessmedia1, rumble.com/fairnessmedia1. We're also on Twitter or x.com, YouTube, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, folks. fairnessinreportingmedia@gmail.com, fairnessinreportingmedia@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us. Pray for our people, our children, our families, and a change in government in 2026. Peace to everyone.